this Ramadan.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to News and Views right here on Salam Media. Our next guest is Suraya Bibi Bhyat-Khan. Suraya Bibi, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear us?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Zahira. I'm glad that we finally got the voice thing done.
Fantastic. Alhamdulillah. It's always such a pleasure to have you on air. Suraya Bibi, you are a recognized anti-apartheid activist, a humanitarian, and definitely a neighbor of note. I've been reading through your bio, and in terms of the amount you've put in around you, to be able to do better for everyone around you is something that is awe-inspiring. Alhamdulillah.
Well, it's what we are supposed to aim for. Muslims, we can't be selfish and look at ourselves only. It's about freeing people that, in relation to the quote which Madiba said, only free people can negotiate. Resistance is not futile and we will not be assimilated. So if we understand that as Muslims, we will not be assimilated. We understand where we come from, what we're supposed to do. We understand our Sharia is very simple and beautifully stated for us.
I think you said that so beautifully, because I think so often, and especially now, we find many people trying to almost forget who they are in order to be accepted. So this need for assimilation has risen so considerably. And I always say, if we actually just recognize and celebrate our differences as well as similarities, there'll be so much more in life. No one needs a copy and paste. So I love the fact that you brought up that there's no need to assimilate. There's a need to actually be able to strongly identify as our own individual, in our own individual capacities.
It's authenticating yourself and understanding from your point of view, from the lenses that you look at the world, for you to understand what does accountability mean. You're not going to be accountable to anyone, not to your husband, not to your children. You're going to be accountable to Allah alone. And that is the most important that should be driving us to say what we are doing. I mean, I'm reading again the eternal message of Muhammad, our Nabi Sallallahu Abdul Rahman Azam, and he talks, and the one chapter here, I can't see the page 246, and he says the world will continue to face the terrors of change and instability, and people cannot cast off their spiritual and mental inheritance with their clothes. In the resulting confusion and indecision, we witness the diversity of thought, views, and ideologies, and the insistent disturbance of life. People, the beauty of understanding why reading is important. Because it's through reading that you have great scholars that write and put forward such important views and opinions for us to learn from. None of us are exceptional in any way. And we know, Allah has given us the Quran, we know who's exceptional and who we look up to. And the final Prophet, our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is a perfect example to say you would like to attain some level of spirituality.
That's it. And may we all aspire to be like that, inshallah. Ameen. And I think, Suraya Bibi, you mentioned one of the main things right now at the offset is to read. And that has been the first injunction given to us, Ikra, which is to read and not to be complacent, to be able to find out more, because once we find out more, we're able to do more. And once we know more, we're able to do better. And I think so many of us have become complacent because we feel that the world just needs to pass by and we do things very ritualistically without actually putting a lot into it. The one thing I have to ask you about is, as I read your bio, you mentioned being very protected as a child during the apartheid times, yet you've come out very strongly as being a very strong activist during the apartheid times. How did that transition begin?
It's because the upbringing was so important. My upbringing, my parents don't ever lie. And not to have a mustard seed of pride. So in
Mm.
being brought up in that protected environment by a village, because Coco was my mother, Mrs. Malifi was my mother, Mrs. Johnson was my mother, Apapa was my mother. These were mothers that took care of everyone's child, not just their child.
Mm.
You were protected in that kind of environment. And my father didn't want us to grow up, after removals from Suraya time. We went to live finally in Everton. And like Robin, I always talk about that lifestyle we had. It was the most beautiful lifestyle. And that's why my focus is about children. That men and women have a duty and a responsibility to bring children up with that kind of not just rights, but duties and responsibilities. So yeah, it's important, but sometimes we fall into a trap where we talk about ignorance is bliss, but ignorance is not bliss. No,
Mm.
no, ignorance is not bliss. So yeah, they talk about the four types of people in the world. The first category is the one who knows, truly knows, and truly knows that he or she truly knows that is a true scholar, a wise
Mm.
person. The second is the person who does not know and knows he and she does not know, and surely they mean it, is a seeker. Help him or her out. That is the person who truly seeks to know, help him or her. The third is people who know yet does not know that he or she knows that he's a dreamer, wake him in the up. And then
Mm.
finally, the fourth is one who does not know and does not know that he or she does not know, assumes that
Mm.
he and she knows and does not seek to know. That is a fool, stay away from him. These
I
are
love
things
that.
that we need to understand because
Yeah.
you talking to people and uh, sometimes you understand people will listen, but I've been in this dialogue platform for over 20 years. Our newsletter, the first one, and we still call our newsletter Humanity, because we bring women from different levels and different places together and we dialogue.
Yes.
We dialogue. We talk to one another because we can't continue with this apartheid mentality. Play up your black, your back and play up your black. It doesn't work.
That's it. I think, Suraya Bibi, you've mentioned so many points that I've picked up on, and without a doubt, I can see you are a reader because you're a thinker as well. So I think when you said, ignorance is not bliss, because so often people use that excuse and we just go, ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is just convenience because you choose not to know more, you choose not to learn more, and you choose not to know better. I love that you said, your father taught you about not even having a mustard seed of sorry about that, about of pride. And I love the fact that your human rights and your activism was so steeped into your religion. Did you find that the two merged together to form a great part of your identity?
Of course. Because it's like the two parts with my mom and my dad, the male and female kind of thing, and the
Yeah.
beauty of them being able to get along. But just on that, you talk about the reed thing. Busisiwe Linda from Orange Farm. When we did our newsletter, I asked everyone to write a little something to put it
Mm.
in with the pictures. So Busi wrote a poem. He wrote a read. The excuse which is made by people who don't like reading from the
Mm.
age 2 to 12 years, they say we are too young to read. And then from 12 to 22 years, they are too active to read. And then from 22 to 36, they are too busy to read. 36 to 50, they are too old to read. And then they die, and it's too late to read. This is where Linda's poem. Beautiful. I mean, the encouragement the women give me, because they understand when I say to them, I was raised by the village. I was raised, in those days there wasn't, and even
Mm.
today, parents, you can't raise anything about their children doing things that you find is not healthy for the child.
Mm.
Tell you straight, it's not your child, it's my business.
And I think we've
So
taken I always say that, we tried to fix what our parents broke, but we took very little of the wisdom that was there and that was given to us, because had we taken that, we wouldn't be having the difficulties we're having now. Because, as you mentioned, it takes a village. I grew up very much in a small town community where everyone was involved in everybody's upbringing, and it was remarkable. And these days, as we feel we're getting smarter, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, we're actually becoming far more nuclear and far more isolated. And that's been a huge change in the way we see community dynamics.
I mean, the other day there was a what do you call this in Zoom, a webinar, and I listened because it was young people, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, but thank goodness Allah, I make shukr for Shamila Ghani, because she jumped in and put her perspective forward in such a way that it was where I said, now this is where we can now take the dialogue towards the intergenerational, because the young people were going on about ageism,
Yeah,
and therefore what Busisira did in I don't want to take up too much of your time, Saira, but there's so much that is being done by people, and everyone is doing their little bit. And this is where Salam Media is so important, because we need to bring out that humanity. Doesn't matter what
absolutely.
age. It doesn't matter what age. It's a
It,
question of can you put the right things across? You've got a platform.
absolutely.
This
That's it. And I think
platform must enhance the good.
You're so right. And I think the beauty about having platforms like Salam Media is it does also acknowledge the wisdom and the experience of the people that have come before us and the people that have been there. And it's honoring that for us to be able to guide the youth to move forward. And I think it works very well in that regard. Alhamdulillah. Suraya Bibi, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you. Just in closing, before we let you go, I know you have been an activist, and I think once you are an activist, it's always a part of your life. I don't think it's something that ever ends up leaving you. Where do you see yourself going forward from here? I know reading is definitely on the books, but where do you see yourself going forward from here?
You know what? It's been building a movement for dialogue with the South African women.
Hmm.
So it's in relation to how do we understand, for people to be understanding what opium is. You know what is opium?
Yes.
But I mean OPM, not opium. I
Yeah.
mean OPM. Other
OPM.
people's money. How other people's money are involved in the election messages and the choices. So people's personal and political agency is not coming because they don't read. And when you're reading so much that is being said in all of the political parties and their manifestos and what have you, how do we, in a collective, I would say collective, me being part of Salam Media as I see myself, how do we provide that kind of leadership uh,
Mm-hmm.
to have an impact? Who do you want to be associated with? Do you want to be associated with people who fund and support genocide? And I think that is where the genocide and where we want to go and talk about rebuilding a future in a different time, in a different way. Because our Nabi Sallallahu left us with so much. There is so many books that have been written, but we are involved in competitiveness with one another, even as Muslims, as sisters, as brothers. We want to compete that I know better and I know more. And that is not how you're going to be judged by our, inshallah, Allah knows best, Allah wa
Amen.
alim.
Amen.
But
Amen.
we need to
Shukran.
open our mind. Critical
Absolutely.
thinking is what is required.
I love that. I think let's hope that there's many more platforms for critical communication and dialogue. Shukran Suraya Bibi Bhyat-Khan for joining us on air today, an activist and a member of EWADI. Us, shukran for having for you being on our platform and for your time. We look forward to chatting to you again soon. We're going to be taking a very quick ad break, and then we'll be back with our next guest.